Nobody is a new action film directed by Ilya Neishler. It is written by Derek Kolstad too, and it stars Bob Odenkirk as a man who's about middle-aged. He's a father in a family that is unfortunately kind of disconnected. He's living a life that he deems kind of monotonous, repetitive, and he's very, very bored with himself. But after a home invasion at his house, a long dormant piece in him is kind of disrupted. A part of him from the past wants out so badly, and from then on, anyone that causes him trouble, he beats the shit out of. Impressively so, because he used to be a guy with a lot of impressive skills. Now, Ilya Neishler directed a movie previously called Hardcore Henry, which at the time I enjoyed, but rewatching it before seeing this movie, I was kind of like, yeah, like, it's okay. Like, I think at the time I was really more impressed with the fact that they did a GoPro POV movie in its entirety. But now that time has kind of passed, it's kind of like, well, it doesn't completely hold up, but it's pretty fun still. I think this director could definitely have a future doing action movies. I'm not sure if GoPro is the way to go, though. I was definitely also more interested in this project specifically because it's written by Derek Kolstad, who previously wrote all 3 screenplays for the John Wick trilogy. John Wick obviously is an action series that I'm really loving right now. 4 is going to be made soon, and 5, they're going to go to John Wick 5, which is really cool. I'm a big fan of that series, so having someone from that creative team, and even some of the producers behind it, like David Leitch, that's really cool to see. But when I was watching the trailer, my main skepticism was, okay, is it just... are they going to ape off of a lot of points of John Wick, though? Because it might as well be that, just instead of a loner whose dog gets killed, it's a middle-aged guy who has his house home invaded. In the trailer, it seemed like there was a lot of similarities to John Wick, so I was hoping that Derek Kolstad didn't write something that was completely derivative. I was a little worried, though, when the movie opened, because they do the same thing that the first John Wick did, which is show a scene from near the end of the movie. If you've seen the trailer, you might have suspected what that scene is. I won't talk about it too much. But yeah, they open up with a scene that essentially kind of spoils the outcome of a specific thing, which is a little bit of a bummer because it's something about that first John Wick that I'm not particularly fond of either. And then even beyond that, the movie is very short. It's about an hour and a half, which is, you know, sometimes that's good, you know, get to the point and then get on their way. But I think for this movie specifically, it kind of rushes through certain important or interesting dynamics that I would have liked to have seen explored a bit more. When the movie goes on, though, there's certain details that are introduced and drop where I'm like, okay, certain things are now starting to piece together that I didn't have when the movie was starting, before we saw that home invasion scene. The movie opens with like a montage that's supposed to be kind of like repetitive of like, yeah, Bob Odenkirk, he's about as bored of this repetitive nature as maybe you would be. But I think that kind of style of montage kind of did come to a detriment to establishing a lot of like important character dynamics in the beginning, before the home invasion happens, which I think would have been important to see. Because you're kind of wondering like what actually is like the family dynamic beforehand. You only really get the sense of like the son is, you know, he kind of has a grudge against his dad because he didn't help him during the home invasion. But we don't know what their dynamic was like before that. His wife, they are kind of cold to each other, but for unclear kind of reasons. His young daughter is probably the one I like the most, and it's only because he and her have like really cute like father-daughter moments, which is like, oh, that's sweet and that's cute. But even then, it's not like it's anything that deep. Not that I even really require it for a movie like this, but it just felt like they needed some form of conflict, so this will do. But it just felt like they didn't really fully deliver on what these things ultimately kind of promised, that the potential of these storylines to kind of make a full arc. And without spoiling anything, even as the movie goes on, it seems like they have a couple opportunities to just hit the nail on the head of what this movie's about, what they're trying to really get at. And they do offer up a theme or moral of some kind in the movie that like that's kind of important to Bob Odenkirk's character, but I think it could have gone a little further. That being said, though, these things didn't really bother me a whole lot because Bob Odenkirk is really carrying this movie. His character is very entertaining, and he does a really great job pulling this off. You totally buy that he is just like a boring middle-aged man, but then when he does make that turn of being a complete badass, you totally buy that flip, because when he gets hit, you feel it. You feel the pain through the filmmaking, the impressive direction from Ilya Neishler, which this is definitely a step up from Hardcore Henry. You feel that pain he feels, and his opening fight is him against like 6 other guys. So of course, he's not going to be a perfect badass. He's going to get his ass handed to him. But what makes that character better than like the average person is that he gets back up and has extreme brute force to then match at that point. it's really impressive stuff, and you totally buy Bob Odenkirk in the role. I know he's been like working out for like 2 years to get to this point where he was ready to do this movie, which is really great to have that kind of dedication for a character, to especially surprise a lot of people too. Like, I'm gonna put my all in this just so people can see me in a different light. That's really impressive on his part. And to have all the action scenes work all the way through is really great. The camera is constantly kind of locked down. You get to see everything in motion. You don't have a moment where you're like, oh, too many quick cuts, or that's moving too quickly. Like, everything, you see everything play out, and it's glorious to see in R-rated grisly fashion. It's really great to see. Elia Neishler really did do a really great job behind the camera of this. Obviously, it helps to have some of the John Wick people kind of involved with the creative decisions, but this really does show that I was right about him. He really can have a really great future in action filmmaking if he really wants to. Maybe they can have another go at like the GoPro stuff, but I honestly prefer action movies where you can see everything and you're not kind of disoriented anyway. Like, the only thing I can really say like negatively about the direction is like sometimes there's some staging of things. Like, how come these people aren't rushing to a place where there's obviously a lot of noise going on, or how come this character did this like in the open, like without any like qualms or anything like that. And Christopher Lloyd is in this movie, and there's a couple times where you can tell he's kind of doing like an old man shuffle, like Bob Odenkirk and RZA, who is actually pretty funny in this movie. RZA, you know, they're actually like moving and going quickly, but Christopher Lloyd, of course, is kind of shuffling along. And it's not no offense to him personally, it's just it's kind of it became kind of obvious that they were trying to cover that up in the movie. But other than that, like, those are things that you can overlook. Like, the action is so incredibly fun and just twisted in its R-rated nature. But speaking of Christopher Lloyd, he provided one of my favorite parts of the movie. Like, there's a scene where I legitimately didn't know where it could potentially go, because for the most part it's just like, yeah, Christopher Lloyd is here, but he's just kind of sitting down. You know, he's just kind of, it feels like he's just kind of an old man role. But then something happens where I was like, holy shit, that is fucking amazing that they got Christopher Lloyd in this movie to do this. It's really tremendous. It's tremendous stuff. And from then on, after that point, he became a character that was a lot of fun to watch. The villains aren't really anything special. The main guy, they kind of try to play it up as like, oh yeah, he's like a fun party guy, but he can get really dark and violent, but they didn't really do anything like that interesting with him, or they didn't really give me enough of a reason to care. Like, I cared about like the villain dynamics in that first John Wick movie, which of course this movie does have its derivative moments of that, like certain things where you're like, that feels like something out of John Wick, or that feels like something that's subverted but still from John Wick. Not that I'm gonna fault the movie for that, because there's a lot of times where movies do similar things to other ones, but it's just a little more apparent when you know that certain people involved with John Wick made it. I wanted to really buy into like the chaotic, fun energy that the actor playing like the main guy was giving, but just the character ultimately kind of fell flat for me, just as far as like the writing for it goes. It never really felt like, you know, there's like a really there's going to be like a really intense showdown between him and Odenkirk later that's going to be so cool, like the main guy and John Wick. There's even like a side villain that they give him like exposition lines of dialogue to quickly establish who he is. Like, oh, is this going to be someone who's like really important to the plot? Maybe later on, maybe this guy is going to be the true villain in a sense. And like that without spoiling anything, no, not really. They just kind of did it to do it. The villains really do just kind of come across as just like, we need bodies to just scatter all over the floor when Bob Odenkirk is done with them. But that's the movie. The movie is fairly simple. It's just a really grisly R-rated action movie that is helmed really well. It's got a really great score to it too. The soundtrack, some of the needle drops they do, I think were actually really well done, and that they match some really well edited sequences. Bob Odenkirk is obviously great here. Christopher Lloyd is fun, and so is RZA. They do a pretty good job of establishing a different kind of world. Like, if they wanted to branch off of this, they had plenty opportunity to grow out this world and elaborate more on certain things. I do think there are certain things that could have been a little better in the narrative perspective, like dealing with his family dynamics, and also like the opening of the movie maybe could have been a little bit stronger with establishing certain things. A lot of it is just like you get kind of the basic idea. Even when Bob Odenkirk kind of reaches his epiphany point, like a lot of characters do in movies near the third act, even that feels like a little too basic for what they could have done. But overall, like, I had a really fun time with this movie, so I'm not complaining too much. I'm gonna give Nobody a B-. It's definitely a ton of fun. Bob Odenkirk is so much fun to watch here. If you wanted to see this movie, then please go check it out. You'll probably have a really great time with it. If you want something up to the caliber of the John Wick movies, this probably won't be for you. You probably will be kind of like, Like, it was pretty fun, but even then, like, it's still a fun time. I would definitely recommend seeing it just to see Bob Odenkirk pull this off, because he really does pull it off. But if you've seen Nobody, leave in the comments below what you thought of it, and as always, thank you guys for watching. Make sure to subscribe. I'm Jackson Fulcher. See you guys next time.